Every successful person got there by going through tough times. Success is a hard-ass teacher who likes to knock you around along that journey. You know, it takes real guts to not give up and keep going. We'll hear stories about failures and how these leaders flip the script to create success. I'm John Schultz. Join me and let's discover how success is never really overnight. So welcome to the John Schultz podcast. Got a great guest today, Joel Neeb. I can't help it. Thor is his call sign. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Joel, but you know, I just saw the movie Top Gun, so I'm all into this. And now we got a real fighter pilot, like a real one, that we can talk to. But Joel's the VP of execution and transformation of VMware, which is a great company. He's the former CEO of Afterburner, a corporate training organization. Survivor of stage 4 cancer. My mother went through that as well. And at the same time, your son had a lung tumor. So they fought through that together. So, wow, that's unbelievable. YPO chapter president in Atlanta. Love YPO. We're both in YPO. We're a little older now, but it's a great CEO organization around the world. It's global. U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, Chief Instructor Pilot, and graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy. And if not enough, the guy's like a 3-time American Ninja Warrior competitor. Wow, I'm jealous already. At least I do my Peloton every day, so that's something. And co-author of Survivor's Obligation. So wow, lots of stuff. Joel, thank you so much for being on. This is an honor to have you.
John, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So obviously with everything going on, Top Gun just passed $1 billion. You know, everyone loves the fighter pilot movies and just the whole coolness of it. So like, how did you even think you wanted to become a fighter pilot when you were young? I mean, a lot of people dream about it, but you actually did it. So how did that happen?
Yeah, great question. So I grew up in the 80s, and as you alluded to, Top Gun was just this incredible movie, especially for a young preteen kiddo. And so for me, it was completely transformative. I saw the movie. That's what I wanted to be. Now, fast forward a couple years later, and I didn't quite have, you know, that same drive as I was leaving high school to go become a fighter pilot. Not that I didn't want to, but it wasn't like this burning call to action like a lot of my friends had at the Air Force Academy. And so for me, when I had the opportunity to go to the Air Force Academy and pursue a career as an officer, it just made sense that I'd try out the pilot route. And I fell in love with it. And being a fighter pilot is, you know, every part of my being at this point.
It's unbelievable. So really, it was Top Gun. Like that actually motivated you to look into it. That's 100%.
Amazing.
Wow.
Really common story around my classmates.
Wow, that's awesome. So all right, so you're in. So what's it like? I mean, obviously, we all struggle in everything that we do, whether it's sports as a kid, you know, getting into business when you first start. What do you have to go through to actually be one? I mean, obviously we see in the movies some of what they do, but it seems like it would be much more in depth than that. And mentally, physically, what do you have to go through?
Yeah, so the selection process, as you can imagine, really arduous. To get into the academy, there's about 13 applicants for every one person that they bring in. Once you're at the academy and you graduate, there's about 1,000 people, we'll use round numbers, and 300 of them will get a pilot slot from the Air Force Academy. And then of those 300 people, will be broken down into classes of 30, and in a class of 30 in flight school, 1, 2, or 3 of us will get a fighter pilot slot out of all of that. So you can see at every level, they continue to filter, and you have to prove and get past that next gate. So it's a massive intellectual challenge. It's an emotional challenge as you're just persevering through this transformation. And then it's a physical challenge as well, enduring 9 Gs, as they talked about on Top Gun Maverick, and just the physical toll that takes on your body.
And like when you're in that obviously position to even be accepted, right? Because obviously you're accepted in. What's the goal to like move up as being a young fighter pilot? Like what's the success route that is necessary to think about when you're actually in?
Yeah, so it's interesting. You graduate flight school, and now you are pretty much like a figure skater, let's call it, and you need to go learn how to play hockey. And so you're great at manipulating the aircraft, but you don't know how to do it from a combat perspective. You don't know how to tactically deploy, and so then you got to go on to fighter pilot school, and they're going to take your flying skills, which, oh, by the way, you've only honed over the last 11 or 12 months. Before that, you were driving a car as your means of transportation, and then in fighter pilot school, now they're taking everything that you learned and max performing the aircraft every time you get airborne. $50 million jet plane that you're flying at 23 years old, and then deploying it in a combat environment to make sure that you're effective. And so that's what the training entails. How do you prepare for that inevitable battle down the road?
Has the technology, I mean, because, obviously when Top Gun was formed, it was a different world. Has the technology gotten so good where are you flying as much real airplanes or is a lot of simulator? How has that sort of changed or advanced during the years?
It's interesting. The simulators are so good and the fidelity is so strong that if I put a person into a simulator, there's a good chance they're going to get airsick. So in other words, somebody who's never flown before, if they go upside down, they'll literally have that physical reaction to it. And so it's like looking at a Google map effectively as you're flying around in the simulator. But, and this is the interesting part, John, because I lived on the pilot training side of this. And of course, in our world, as we're trying to balance budgets and figure out what's a good combination of airtime versus simulator time, we wanted to lean towards the simulator as much as we could because the fidelity was so strong. And we thought maybe we can even do the entire training with this. What we found out there was no replacing the actual experience of being in the sky and feeling the G's and having your mask be sweaty on your face and a little too tight and all the radio calls that are going off in your ears, all those distractions. The sim was phenomenal at creating habit patterns and principles, but then you had to put those to test in the real moment in the sky.
It's interesting. I mean, I feel, it's not an exact, analogy, but it's like working from home or being in the office around people. I mean, you're just not going to get the same feeling on a Zoom screen, which is a simulator of what we're trying to create since COVID, to actually being around and hanging out and feeling mannerisms and energy. It's a different energy. You don't get it from a Zoom screen, but so that's interesting. And that makes sense. So, okay. So you made it all the way through. I'm loving this, right? How did you earn this nickname Thor? I mean, first of all, like, how do you get a nickname? The call signs are so cool. We all just saw the movie again, and there were some new call signs entered into the Top Gun movie. How does that work, and why is that even a thing? Like, why? Like, they call me Schultzy, but my name's Schultz. They're not calling me, Thor or something else.
Yeah, we're really brand conscious and culture conscious as fighter pilots. And the reason for that is we're constantly having to hold people to this incredibly high standard. And what we forget is that we're all humans, and you're going to strap a $50 million jet to your back, and you're going to have this primal fear when you take off and you go upside down and you're going 500 miles an hour. And so in order to get through that primal fear and to still be successful in that environment, we constantly had to reinforce the culture behind the scenes and the brand that we wanted to display for everyone else. So when you think about these big, cool call signs like Thor, Maverick, all these things, it's really our way of reinforcing that we're creating a new person and a new brand out of you individually, but then more importantly, as part of the team that you're going to be a part of. And so it seems like it's, machismo or whatever you'd want to call it on the negative side for having all these call signs and nicknames. We're reinventing people, and we have a naming ceremony, and we give them a new name. And I have people who don't even know my first name is Joel in my life, and I've known them for 20 years because that's how much we use call signs.
So how do you get, like, who gives you the name? Like, is it associated with a personality type? Like, because Thor, to me, obviously that's another character on TV, is just this, badass, freaking superhero, right? So why did you get Thor instead of Maverick or Slider, or, how does that work? And how does that come about?
Yeah, so nicknames and the call signs are always given by your peers. And so you sit down with a group at your naming ceremony. There's usually a beverage of choice being consumed around the crowd, and we're all having fun telling stories about that person who's sitting in a chair and getting their new call sign, their new name, the new name that they'll be known by for the rest of their lives. And we're telling stories about that person, and the stories are always embarrassing stories. And that's part of it too. We give each other a hard time. We don't let our egos get so big that we can't put it in check and laugh at ourselves a little bit. And
Yeah.
so there's two stories to every call sign origin. There's a cover story and there's the actual story. My cover story, the one I tell everybody, is that I was the hammer as an instructor, and so Thor the hammer, and
Oh,
not super
I like
interesting.
that.
And then the real story requires a one drink minimum for me to share it, but I can tell you it may or may not include an airplane being struck by lightning. We'll leave it at that.
Okay, there you go. All right. Well, we'll let our imaginations take that one. I love it. I love it. So, all right. So you get this name. You're an instructor. You're it's elite. I mean, I'm enamored by it because first of all, I'm a little claustrophobic and have other fears, right? So the fact that you're actually in this little bullet of a plane and you could be sitting there hours, like 5 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, right? First of all, even how do you go to the bathroom in these things, right? It's like you could be flying a mission, but what did you do to conquer your fears? Because listen, those are superhero type things that you were doing. So we all think that, they may have no fears, but I know that's not true. And what, like anything from your military training helped you like get through your fears? Like, how did that
Right.
come about?
It's a great conversation to have around organizational identity and how you set your team members, especially your junior team members, up for success. And so there's a couple of ways that we approach that. So I'm going to talk about it from my point of view as being a student, and then later on as being the chief instructor pilot at the Air Force headquarters for flight training. So as a
Got it.
student, I thought it was just me that was afraid. Like every morning I'd wake up and my hands would be shaking because I'm about to do something that's just so inherently dangerous as I thrust my body through the sky faster than the speed of sound 3 feet away from another aircraft. And oh, by the way, I just learned to do this 3 months ago, and I'm trying to keep myself alive.
Yeah.
And you can imagine you have all the primal fears that any person would have. So for us, what it comes down to is the following. You have to have a really compelling destination, something that's inspiring you, that call to action that's established. And for us, we knew that we wanted to become that prototypical fighter pilot. And we all had this image in our head of the consummate professional and this person who just was able to rise above their fears. And that, in the end, we were going to learn these skills to manipulate the plane successfully and keep the missions on track and lead others. But we had that destination in mind at all times. And then the other piece of it was that I had a process to start approaching that destination. And we have a very, very structured process in the military to create fighter pilots, to create Navy SEALs. All the elite teams have both that destination as well as the process established. And then, of course, the little secret is the process is horrible, by the way. I mean, nobody wants to endure the process. If you don't start with why, if you don't start with the destination, nobody's going to participate in the process. And the best example is the Navy SEALs. If I told you, I'm going to take you and drag you through the sand. I'm going to hold you underwater until you most likely pass out. I'm going to give you about 4 hours of sleep in a week. I am going to, make you carry a canoe above your head through waters that are washing over you, and you can't touch the ground at the beach, and you feel like you're about to drown, and it's in the middle of the night. Oh, by the way, you hear all these things, and you'd say, that sounds like a torture story. Like, who would ever put up with that?
Yeah.
I'm going to call the police. But then when you say, but you're on your path to become a Navy SEAL and you're going to become one of the most elite stewards of peace and elite teams in the world, then people say, now I get it. The destination means something, and I'm going to pursue that via the path you just talked about.
So you just kept thinking that the whole way through. And it's interesting, right? Because once you do anything once, it's just the not knowing what it is until you first do that first time of whatever it is, good, bad, hard, not so hard. But still, that's a whole nother level of freak out. But obviously that's why you're a fighter pilot and most people aren't. But so cool, so cool. So, all right. So after fighter pilot world and Thor became Thor, what happened after that? Like, what made you get out of it and move on? And, why actually? Because you could have stayed
So
there.
I was a fighter pilot.
You know, you look at Tom Cruise. 30 years later, he's still hanging out as in the whole scene.
Yeah. So I was a fighter pilot for about 9 years, and I had accomplished amazing things in the jet and done some incredible things with my friends in the sky on an incredible mission. But now I'm at the point where, if I'm being honest, it's really in my comfort zone, right? And in flying, which used to be a primal fear, now I've gotten past that, and it didn't happen overnight. It took a couple of years for me to really get through that as I was learning new things. But I'm 9 years into this journey. I'm much more comfortable with it at this point. And so, if I'm being real honest, I'm kind of coasting. And this is the time when I got my cancer battle. And so I got out of left field. I was auditioning to be the next Thunderbird pilot, like the Navy's Blue Angels, except better, in the Air Force. Yep.
Except better. Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah. And so I got this cancer diagnosis, and the short of it is I basically said, oh gosh, if I'd known I was going to be dead in 18 months, I would have pursued other things in my life, and I wouldn't have just coasted to this point.
So
and my big lesson
was, so you were told, you were given the diagnosis was that dire.
Oh yeah. So I had stage 4 cancer, and it didn't happen overnight. The first news was I had this weird pain and some other very minor symptoms. Like, you wouldn't think that much of it, but I would keep telling flight docs about it because they're always inspecting us, and we're flying around $50 million jets. They got to make sure we're safe. And so finally they did an ultrasound, and they saw what they called a racquetball, where there shouldn't be a racquetball inside of my body. And they said, it might be cancer, but probably not. You're in great shape and you're very healthy. And then the next week it was, well, now we kind of think it is cancer just based on some other tests, but I'm sure it's not, it hasn't spread anywhere. You're gonna be fine. We'll treat it and get you back up in the air in 6 months. And then the next week they said, we're going to do massive surgery. We're going to remove all or part of 4 organs, and it's stage 4 cancer, and we don't know what's going to happen. Then the next week they said, it's this really rare cancer. You have 18 months to live. So in 5 weeks, I went down this path.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Out of nowhere, right?
100%. Yep. I felt great. I was working out. I was, the hardest working person in the gym, and feeling great, but except for those symptoms.
So how'd you get through that?
So that one, there's nothing that really can prepare you for it. And you'd think, well, at least you can fall back on your fighter pilot training or your days at the Air Force Academy, but nothing really prepares you for, I have 18 months to live. I got a 1 and a 3-year-old and a young wife and all the other implications there. And just the horror story, the nightmare that you can imagine it is. And so I spent about 30 days just kind of curled up in the fetal position, feeling sorry for myself. And so I didn't handle it very well, but honestly, I don't know if I had it in me to do it any differently. Like, it was literally, I was completely tapped out.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine. I mean, my mother had a similar but different situation when I was 15. They gave her 6 months, and she completely was in remission for 45 years after. But
wow.
I remember my feeling the most helpless I've ever felt in my life, because it was my mother. And so, but it, wasn't happening to me, but so I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it was, a living nightmare. What the thing that I tell people is, a lot of cancer patients will tell you they love that moment when they first awake in the morning, when they first wake up, because they typically have a few seconds where it was all just a dream, right? Where none of this is really happening. I'm totally healthy. And so they get to live their old life for those few seconds. And a lot of cancer patients will say they love that. I hated that, because every morning I would have that. And for 10 seconds, I would, be wiping the sleep out of my eyes and say, holy cow, was that a weird dream? And I thought I had cancer, and then I'll think, but I can sure remember that doctor's office yesterday, and I can remember everything they said, and I did a test. And then you come to the realization that you're not waking up from a nightmare, you're waking up to one. And so every day I was basically getting diagnosed again as I woke up, and it was this horrible feeling that just overwhelmed me.
So how'd you bust through this? I mean, you're here, you're looking great. And
So like anything, you adapt, right? And so it's amazing what we're capable of enduring. It was a great lesson for me of what we're capable of persevering through. And so I established a new normal in cancer at this time, and identified what I was capable of getting through. and then started to say, well, if I only have 18 months left, then I want to be deliberate about how I live my time and make videos for my kids and everything you can imagine. You don't do it perfectly, and I don't want to make it sound like I figured it all out, but you get into a sense of normality even in those direst of situations.
Wow. So obviously you 18 months came to pass, and what was the magic that happened? Was it belief? Was it just, you know, a combination of things? Like what do you think was actually the solution that while you're talking to us today?
So what was important for me was to get back in the fight. I definitely brought that from my military time, and I would go work out and go for a jog, even if I could only jog around my block, and I would do that with even a chemo bag hanging off of me, just to feel like I was in the fight and doing something to prepare myself for the next 18 months. And my goal was just to squeeze out another month and make it a little bit longer for my kids and get to a point where they could remember me or create another memory or take another picture. All of those things became my new goals for life as I was reflecting on it would probably be the last days for me. The difference, if you were to say, like, what did you do differently? What can we learn from that? You can't will yourself into surviving. Clearly, I saw many great people that were fighting just as hard as me that didn't have a good outcome from their situation. But on the flip side, you can absolutely will yourself into dying. And I saw that as well. I was amazed at how much the body follows when the mind gives up. And it was such a surprising thing to see. And then I've seen it replicated in life and professional endeavors and in other places that positive mental attitude is really the determining factor for success. It doesn't guarantee you success, but you pretty much guarantee failure if you can't maintain it.
You're bringing me back. So my mom was my hero. And unfortunately, she passed a couple of years ago from something else. But when I was 15, I told you I went through this experience. And when you say the mind is powerful and you can't will yourself to live, but you can will yourself to die. I mean, that was just like, boom. Because my mom came when she finally found out that day, that 5 weeks you were waiting sucked, right? I mean, like, just tell me tell me what it is so I can like start moving, right? She came home. She's like, I'm going to take a shower every night. I'm going to wash this shit, these cancer cells right out of my body. She used to do it every night. She said, you don't worry. Now that I know, I'm going to keep moving forward. And her brain was so powerful, I think, in her recovery. And she used to go back to the hospital once she was in remission, because remember, hers was 45 years ago, way when there wasn't even as much science behind like what, you can do to fix this. And she would go to the people on the younger med students to say, obviously all things we're doing here is important, but like brain and mind and confidence in yourself matters during this process. And she used to be one of the ones that they would bring in. So you're bringing me back to like why you're a hero for going through it. And, obviously my mom, I feel the same. So thank God you're here, because we're learning from you, and now we're going to learn some more. So, okay, you got through this. Thank God. What was your first next thing you did? Like, because you probably look back like, I don't want to do this anymore. Why am I doing this? I mean, did you get more discerning about things? How did that experience really change your life? Or was it for 6-7 months and then all of a sudden you're back to back to Thor or that person?
Yeah, great question. It was definitely the crossroads, or at least the opportunity to be a crossroads. And there's a quote that the dying have the most to teach us about life. And I think it's true, because it's in those worst moments where all of a sudden all the other noises of life and all the other silly things that we pay attention to on a daily basis just go away. Like in a heartbeat, they're gone. And we're left with what's most important and what should have been most important all along. And for me, we sat around in the chemo room and we all talked about what we would do when we got better, because we tried to stay optimistic in that positive mental attitude. Yeah. And somebody would say, I am going to go to the Super Bowl. I've always wanted to do that once I'm better. I am going to start a new business. I've always wanted to start a new business. And then somebody will say, I'm going to fix the relationship with my daughter. It's just soured over the last couple of years. I'm going to go spend a ton of time with her. I can't wait to go on vacation with her. whatever it was. And then the next week, maybe one of them didn't show up after that. And it was a very somber reminder of the consequences that we were all facing and could face in a very short period of time. So for me, what I said was, I loved being a fighter pilot. It was amazing. It's an incredible experience, but I didn't want it to be the book of my life. I wanted it to be a chapter. And if I was being real honest with myself, I'd been coasting up until this point, and I found it pretty easy flying upside down faster than the speed of sound for the past couple of years. I like signing autographs. I like going by and doing a NFL flyby and all the attention it got. But that was really just ego building, and it had nothing to do with the real things that I wanted out of life. And it took this situation to show me that. And so I said, I am going to completely switch paths. If I get a second chance, that's what I'm going to do. And then I found myself on the other side of this, and a lot of them weren't. And I said, I got to hold myself accountable to what I said in there, because I'm living the second chance that every one of those other people would have given anything to have. And I have an obligation to fulfill that.
Wow. So may I ask, so what was your biggest focus from that? What was it?
So my takeaway from that experience, a couple of things. So for me, I look back at my life and I thought I was going to be dying soon. And what I was surprised by was what I valued at that time and what I regretted. So what I figured what I valued would be the big wall of fame that I had in my house with all of my awards and pictures of me doing amazing, cool things that I wanted to do. And I thought this is going to boost my ego and get me to the next level. None of that mattered. I could care less. I couldn't care less about any of the awards, all these things that I fought for, all these dumb little trifles, trinkets, literally meant nothing at that point in time. And so that I regretted that I pursued that instead of other things. What I valued were those times when I was on an inspiring mission with an elite team. So my favorite memories are from the Air Force Academy, and I'm with incredibly inspiring people on a mission to graduate together and go save the world as a team. And then as a fighter pilot, the same thing. Or my family, the elite team that I'd helped create. So that's what I wanted to replicate. If I had a chance to do it over again, throw away all the awards. Who cares? Throw away all the titles and ranks and whatever else you want to do to build your ego. So my biggest lesson was, I'm going to pursue those moments as much as I can.
So it sounds like you like the journey, the myth to the whole success. The success thing comes if you're on that journey with the right like-minded people. It's like feeling part of a team, right? Part of a culture, I would say, which I think is awesome. Yeah. So then how did that translate to, again, I keep bragging about you, the Ninja Warrior thing. Like, so here you are, because that's a show to get an award, right? So how did that happen? Like what made you want to go do that? Just to show that you had your strength back, or like what was the directional reason for that?
So that was born out of this lesson I had from cancer, which was I really only got happiness from three things. So as you said earlier, what got you through those 18 months and what was different about that time? How do you persevere? For me, I realized that only three things were really making me happy in life, and they still could make me happy, which was amazing in and of itself during cancer. It was what I call my 3 Gs: growth, giving, and gratitude. And it sounds like Hallmarky, but literally these are the most important things in life for me, and that's what I focused on since. Growth, getting outside of my comfort zone, doing things that scare me every single day. There's the best things in life are always on the other side of our fear, and I challenge myself to get outside of my comfort zone and do something I'm scared of every day. Giving, helping somebody else to the place where I'm at. And you don't have to be a CEO to do that. You can be any place in life. You're at a place where somebody else wishes they were, and you have the ability to help lift them up. And when you do that, when you help somebody else up, you can't feel sorry for yourself. It's literally impossible. I found that out when I had cancer and I was helping out these underprivileged youth in the city of San Antonio. We had this great program that I was running for all the kids in this school district that just horrible graduation rate, 35%. We would reach out to these kids, and I would forget I had cancer. It was just amazing in that moment. For a little bit. How
wild is that? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And then the last one was gratitude. And that even in my worst moments, in the worst days, I can still find something to be grateful for and to say, like, I am thankful that I have this connection with my family. I am thankful for this experience today. And by framing things that way, I had a much better inventory of what was going well in my life, because all of a sudden that was in short supply. And, I wanted to make sure I had my eye on it so that when I went back to my normal life and I still had that superpower of identifying what's going well and what I can be grateful for, well, all of a sudden I'm living a life of plenty, right? And in the same life that was boring and I'm getting kind of tired of and frustrated with, and why don't I have more? At pre-cancer, now all of a sudden, like, I'm the most blessed guy in the world.
I read a lot of books, and we're going to talk about your book. I read a lot of books. I read a lot of quotes, people saying all the things you just said, but what's so authentic about hearing it from you is like, you are those things. Like, you are growth. You did go and do things that were so fearful, G3, it's, you should have a hat. You should wear it, say G3, right? So, like, because that was amazing. I'm so glad that came into this discussion. And I guess, so you did your Ninja Warrior. Obviously, that got you out of your comfort zone. The great show, by the way. It's so much fun watching that show. So then you wrote a book, right? So you're doing things, right? I guess were you in a new business at that point? Did you VM? When did that come into play? Like, what was your next thing after that?
Yeah, so my first challenge is I was, coming to this period where I realized I might have a little bit more time than 18 months. And we still didn't know. It's not like you hit 18 months and you say, I'm going to live 10 years like I have. But I could at least open the aperture, and a new horizon was maybe 2 or 3 years down the road. And I said, all right, I'm clearly surviving. Maybe I won't fully survive this, but if I got to hold myself accountable to what I said I was going to do in the chemo room. And so I left the military. I went and got an MBA, went totally outside of my comfort zone. I did the dumbest thing you can do when you're sitting 6 years away from guaranteed retirement, which is in the military, you get it at 20 years. And that's throw that all away to go pursue something new. But it wasn't scary at all, because I had already experienced real scary, and this was just an opportunity. This was just it changed one word in my life, and that one word has meant the difference in everything. Pre-cancer, there were a lot of things I had to do. I had to go pursue being a colonel, or I had to go pursue being a fighter pilot, or I had to get a wife, or I had to do all these things. I put the pressure on myself. And post-cancer, I didn't have to do anything, because I almost didn't get to do anything. I get to go do this. I get to go run an Ironman and, do this for the first, I've never done a marathon or a triathlon before. I get to try to do that. I get to go on Ninja Warrior and make a fool out of myself in the early stages and fall off early, only to come back stronger in the following years. Those things would have terrified me pre-cancer, but that change of that one word, I don't have to do this, I get to, has made all the difference.
Dude, that's everything. So now you're the second person. I heard this even when we went to the YPO conference, and the person with the no arms and the no legs, Voyevich, said, I get to. I actually have that saying now in my bathroom every morning, right? Because if you really look at things that you get to and that you're grateful, right? You have the grateful, the gratitude, and that you get to grow from it. So that's amazing. Wow. So you made a move, and then how'd this book come into play? So what made you? Because I say this a lot. Like, writing a book's a grind. I've never done it. I actually tried. It's like very hard.
So for me, what it came down to was, as I was going through cancer, I had all these epiphanies, and it really, now that I look back at it, it's the greatest blessing in my life, because it allowed me to turn a corner that I definitely would not have turned had it not been for cancer and forcing me to come to grips with some of the things I hadn't done in life, or some of the principles that I hadn't that I compromised on. And so I said, I wish I would have had this lesson before cancer. I sure wish I wouldn't have taken cancer to have this. And if I can tell this story to somebody else and have it resonate and help them to learn something from it, I will. And I made a deal with God. I said, I will write a book if I can get a second chance at some point. If I don't get a second chance, if I'm gonna be dead in 18 months, I'm not wasting time at a typewriter and writing out a novel. Only if
you
I
had
get a second
conditions
chance.
for God. I love that. It's like
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So survivor's obligation. So were you doing it to sell books, or just to like get yourself feeling good about writing something that you went through, which I think is cathartic, right? It probably made you feel really good to go through it again in a different way.
Absolutely. And to bring it back to what we talked about earlier, it's growth and giving. So it's growth on my part. I'm totally uncomfortable writing. I've never written a book before. I got to put everything out there and be very vulnerable. So I had a fear associated with that and a reluctance to do that. So it got me outside of my comfort zone. On the giving side, I was taking everything that I had learned and I was giving that back to the community. And once again, that's a very selfish act. I choose that word intentionally. When you give, you can no longer feel sorry for yourself, and you are also taking stock of how far you've come. You have to do that. In order to tell somebody else how to get where you're at, you have to be able to communicate where you're at and how important that is. And so these lessons, all of a sudden, it was just so great to synthesize them and see other people impacted by it. And so it's just a natural next step.
I love it. That's so good. So, like, what do you plan to tackle next? I'm getting exhausted just listening to you in a good way. I love your energy and your enthusiasm. So I know you're at VMware, but what do you want to tackle next? Because that's work. Like, what's your next uncomfortable moment? And what are we going to do? Watch you on a new show? Like, where we go with all this?
Yeah, great question. So I spent 8 years at a consultancy called Afterburner. I started as a consultant, and I eventually was the president or the CEO for 5 years. And I just recently went to our biggest customer. I'm still a partner at Afterburner, incredible company. Everybody should use it. But I went to our biggest customer because they needed to transform from the inside out and build better alignment and transform their culture and their operating model to have a more consistent, cohesive value to customers that are all dealing with 40% churn in their employees, just like everybody is, and dealing with the work from home pains and everybody, like you said earlier, not coming together. We all of a sudden had customers dealing with massive complexity. And instead of our value at VMware being the features and the technology we're selling, we had to sell simplicity. And in order to do that, we had to simplify things internally. And so that's what I came to VMware to help do: build alignment and vision, strategy, and execution, and close the feedback loops in a remote environment like we're all in. And I spent the last 6 months driving that transformation for this incredible company. And we had the acquisition looming. We don't know where that's going to end up because we're in their go shop period right now. But Broadcom is looking to pick us up, and it's a good opportunity to continue accelerating along the value path that VMware's created.
Listen, you know what? It's an amazing story. And I have a new friend named Thor. I never thought I'd have a friend named Thor, but now I do. I can't thank you. First of all, Survivor's Obligation. Where can people buy this book?
Yeah, you can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it everywhere. We got the award for Best Memoirs of 2019. But as I said earlier, it's not about awards. I would call it about a 7 or a 6 out of 10 in writing, and out of lessons and things that I would tell other people if they said you have share some critical lessons. A 9 out of 10 because they were so impactful for me. And all the money goes to our charities. Mine is Mission of Hope International, where we're building schools for young girls in Africa and helping them to get an off-ramp out of the cycle of poverty in that community, and it's having an incredible impact. And then my co-authors is giving back to wounded warriors.
And if we wanted to watch an episode of Ninja Warrior that you're on, like what season was it, so we can watch it?
So I just competed, John, and it'll be on July 11th on NBC.
Oh, really? So now you're 4-time on the show. Okay. Yep. July 11th, everyone. Ninja Warrior. What channel is it on?
NBC.
NBC. I love that. Okay. So everyone's going to be loving this episode. Thank you so much for doing it. You're an inspiration, and you're just amazing to listen to. So thanks for doing it. And thanks everybody for listening.
John, it's awesome to be on the show. Thank you.